Hi everyone. I'm just going to get started now. Thank you for your patience. I know some of you joined very early on, so I appreciate it. Um, so thank you so much for attending our Caste in the Diaspora teach-in today. We're really looking forward to this event and we're so happy to have you here with us. We're going to make a start so we don't run over, but we'll probably have a few people trickling in. I have put everyone on mute, but you should be able to unmute yourself if you need to, just because of the echoes and the background noise. And yeah, if you want to put your videos on, please feel free if you're comfortable and that's available to you. I'm sure our speakers would love to see you today when they're presenting. I'd also like to remind you that we are recording this teach-in today, so you should be able to see that in the corner. So if you want to rename yourself or change your photo or be off video, that's fine. Please feel free to do that. For those of you who haven't engaged with us before, I'm the co-founder and I'm the director of the Rights Collective, which is a volunteer-run initiative based in the UK. We are a group of South Asian women from the diaspora who are working towards tackling the distinct and often subtle ways in which disempowerment and oppression and inequality manifest within the South Asian diaspora community in the UK specifically. So I'm going to hand it over to our chair for this event in a second, but before I do that, I just wanted to share a few things about today. So please feel free to use the chat as much as you like to interact with one another, to contribute to the conversation, to ask questions. We'll be keeping an eye on it and we'll be collating your questions to ask the speakers at the end. If you agree with something someone is saying, but you don't want to interrupt them, in real life, we may have nodded our heads or clapped, but in the digital world, that's sometimes a little bit hard to register. So at the Rights Collective, we use the plus sign in the chat to indicate that we agree with someone or that we appreciate what they're saying. So please feel free to use that in the chat box. The more pluses you do, the kind of more you're agreeing with them. Also, a quick announcement that unfortunately one of our speakers, Dr. Murali Shanmugavelan, is unable to join us today due to ill health, but we do have some amazing speakers nonetheless. So hopefully we will have an amazing conversation. I want to remind people once again that of our community guidelines. So by attending this event, we have acknowledged that we're here to learn and unlearn and be challenged and inquire with curiosity. We have a strict zero tolerance policy against any form of harassment or bullying based on any identity. We want this space to be one where people can speak openly about their lived experiences, but also interact respectfully with one another. And I'm sure you all agree. And finally, if you'll be posting about today's event on social media, please feel free to tag us at the Rights Collective and use the hashtag Caste in the Diaspora, which I'll put in the chat in a minute. And yeah, that's everything from me. So I will now hand over to Varun. So Varun is our chair for today. He is currently a visiting assistant professor of classics in Sanskrit at Swarthmore College. He completed his MPhil in Sanskrit and PhD in Hinduism from the University of Cambridge. His research on the Indian diaspora has taken him in the direction of history of caste, caste injustice, and anti-caste activism. He's also joined the board of advisors of the Rights Collective this year, which we're really happy about. Over to you, Varun.
Thank you so much, Nishma. And first of all, I would like to thank all of our lovely speakers. I'm so excited to hear what they have to say and so excited for the discussion to take place today. And also thanks to the Rights Collective for doing the amazing work that you do, to Nishma, Habiba, and the Rights Collective team for organizing this event. And of course, thank you to everybody who has joined us today for this very important conversation. And I really hope that everybody gets something wonderful out of this today, and something that expands our minds and our thinking. So as far as why this event is taking place in the first place, you know, the Rights Collective, of course, is a group that is dedicated to understanding the issues that face people in the South Asian diaspora. And when thinking about justice, when thinking about injustice, one of the central issues that faces the South Asian diaspora is caste. And so this discussion got started in the Rights Collective some time ago, and there were lots of conversations around it, even a reading group that got started around it, which we'll be talking about, of course, later. And so, of course, out of all this churning, the idea to have a teach-in came up. And so we're very pleased to be able to actually organize such an event with such amazing speakers. Caste is an issue that in recent times has gained a surge of discussion and dialogue that has started to happen. And in years past, it was a kind of taboo topic. It was something that people rarely discussed out in the open, but now we are able to have these conversations. And it is so important for us, of course, to start and to continue having these conversations. So today we will be hearing from our speakers, who I'll introduce in just a second, about the nature of caste, the history of caste, the issues that face us in the diaspora with regards to caste, and the discrimination based on caste. And so I am very pleased to introduce our speakers. I'm very grateful to them for joining us today. So I'll just introduce them very briefly and then let them take over. We've organized it in such a way that our speakers will have approximately 15 minutes or so to speak. I will sort of let them know where they are in their time. And then afterwards, we will have a brief Q&A based on some of the things that they have said, and then we will have an open Q&A for everybody to start to ask the questions that they have. So now, of course, as you have questions throughout the conversation, please mention them in the chat, and we will curate those and then be able to ask some of them at the end. So let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Santosh Das here. Santosh Das is one of the leading figures in the campaign to outlaw caste-based discrimination in the UK. She is the chair of the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance, an alliance of Dalit organizations in Great Britain, and president of the Federation of Ambedkarite and Buddhist Organizations UK. Santosh is one of the original co-founders of Caste Watch UK and the co-founder of Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance. In 2013, Santosh took a very early retirement from the Department of Health in Whitehall to concentrate on raising awareness of caste-based discrimination and to lobby for it to be outlawed in the UK. So welcome, Santosh, and thank you very much for being here. Then we have Jyotsna Siddharth. Jyotsna Siddharth is an actor, anti-caste activist, intersectional queer feminist, and writer based in Delhi, India. She is the founder of Project Anti-Caste Love, Dalit Feminism Archive, and a co-founder of CIVE. She has a master's in development studies and social anthropology from SOAS, University of London, and is a recipient of the Chevening Scholarship. So thank you very much for being with us, Jyotsna, and welcome. Really excited to hear from you. And then we have Meena Varma. Meena Varma is the Executive Director of International Dalit Solidarity Network, IDSN, and has been the Director of Dalit Solidarity Network UK, the DSN UK, since 2007. She provides overall leadership of IDSN strategy and management, working very closely with the IDSN board and network members. Through engagement with the UN, EU, and other multilateral institutions, IDSN has had a significant impact on the internationalization of caste discrimination as a critical human rights issue. Meena is also the coordinator of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group for Dalits, which was formed in October of 2010. This is a cross-party group and has members from both the House of Commons and Lords. And so I'm very, very pleased and excited. Thank you, Meena, for joining us as well. And thank you all. So I will actually speak very little. I'm just going to hand it over now, and please let you all take over and please go ahead. So we will start with Santosh. We're very excited to hear from you. So over to you.
I thought I was going to come third, but that's fine. Thank you very much, Varun, for the introduction, and also to the Rights Collective, Nishma, Habiba, for inviting me to speak about our campaign to outlaw caste-based discrimination in the UK. And also Habiba, very much so, for organizing all of this and talking to me throughout for the last couple of weeks. It's a big challenge to condense what is essentially nearly a 2-decade-long campaign to get justice for victims and sufferers of caste-based discrimination in the UK, and also, you know, sort of like a law, you know, which is recognized within the equality legislation. Normally I take about an hour to talk, and so I'll condense this in 15 minutes, and I'll be doing like a really, really fast introduction to what it is that we've done. So, but today what I will briefly cover is the latest on the caste discrimination law. The key reports, I'll just briefly mention them, and the stakeholders and milestones in our campaign to get caste discrimination outlawed, the challenges and the opposition we faced, but also continue to face, and that we are aware that we need to be mindful of. I'll talk a little bit about the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance's 2009 research and some of our findings, and also a little bit about what the ACDA does on a practical level, you know, sort of almost like on a daily level. I mean, first, a little bit about the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance. The ACDA, it was formed in 2008 to monitor and oppose caste-based discrimination in the UK and abroad. We're an independent voluntary organisation registered with the UK's Charity Commission, and we're a team of unpaid volunteers. That's the case for all of us at the ACDA. Now, in the United Kingdom, many of us who arrived, I for one in the late 60s as a little girl, have benefited in varying degrees from the legal protections Britain's equality legislation aims to provide. Now, bearing in mind that I arrived in 1968, you know, when Enoch Powell had done the Rivers of Blood speech. So you can imagine the sort of environment that a little girl, you know, came to in the UK, and how rampant race discrimination was. So we were kind of handling all of that, you know, at the time. So now, you know, if I'm discriminated against because I'm brown or a woman, I've got total confidence that my employer's policies and procedures to listen to, you know, to listen to my concerns and act on it are there, and they're going to be pretty robust, you know, if I need them. But if I'm discriminated against because of my caste, well, that position isn't entirely clear. So what is caste? Now, the Equalities Act 2010 defines it as a hereditary endogamous, that's marrying within the group, community associated with a traditional occupation and ranked accordingly on a perceived scale of ritual purity. It is generally, but not exclusively, associated with South Asia, particularly India and its diaspora. It can encompass the 4 classes, Varnas, of Hindu tradition, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and Shudra communities, and the thousands of regional Hindu, Sikh, Christian, Muslim, or other religious groups known as Jatis, and groups amongst South Asian Muslims called Baradaris. Some Jatis regarded as below the Varna hierarchy, once termed untouchable, are known as Dalits. And that pretty much sums up what caste means to us, and I think what people understand by it generally around the world. And I won't go into this, but in ACDA's report in 2009, when we were looking at how do we define what is the caste system and caste, we actually used the Hindu Forum's definition, and they refer to the various Vedic and the Bhagavad Gita texts as part of their explanation. and that was part of their 2008 report, and we use that as a definition. Now, caste discrimination is no different to other forms of discrimination. It could mean that someone's promotion withheld, or someone's had aspects of their role that the delivery of would have meant, securing a promotion, being removed from their job, work objectives, because a new manager's taken over and doesn't quite like the caste of the person involved. Or it could be that casteist and offensive terms are used directly or within earshot. And it could mean, it could be something, for example, calling somebody a dirty Chamari or a dirty Valmiki. Or, if you don't know what a dirty Chamari, the term is, which is very offensive, is a taunt to a female who comes from the scheduled caste of the Chamar community. And in the past, that community would have been assigned to be working with animal carcasses or leather within the caste system. But people have moved on, and people don't necessarily work in those, those trades from these castes necessarily. And a taunt like that to a person is as offensive as using the N-word. It's as blunt as that. I don't use the N-word, but it's as blunt as using the N-word. So the pro-quality clause on caste in the Equality Act 2010 that Parliament made in April 2013 a duty on government to implement has yet to be implemented. And now if the caste duty had been implemented by the government, essentially that would have outlawed caste discrimination in the UK and provided the clarity in the law that's absolutely required. But furthermore, in July 2018, the government announced that it would repeal the law altogether. And they argue that one employment tribunal in the lower courts, like a case law, the Turkey versus Chudnoks case judgment in 2015, proves that existing law is enough. And we beg to differ. The UK's Independent Equality and Human Rights Commission, that's responsible for overseeing the implementation of laws and application of laws, agrees with us and all the other organisations that are lobbying for the law. Now, the government argues that the responses, it's based its decision on the responses to a 2017 public consultation. And they say on that should have really been about how to implement the law and not about whether to implement the law at all. The decision on whether to implement the law had already been made by Parliament in 2013. But the government went out to consultation for 4 months in 2017. And basically they asked the question, do you think we should implement the law, or can we rely on case law? And basically a lot of responses came in, and communities mobilized themselves, and there were a lot of responses in support for just sticking with case law, which is saying let the existing law stand the way it is. And the Turkey and Chandok case, which is about a woman who'd been brought in as a domestic help by a couple who'd been discriminated against because of her caste. She was from one of the tribal communities, and she had suffered a lot. She hadn't been given her pay and wasn't given holidays and so on. And she escaped that. And with the help of the anti-trafficking unit, she managed to get some justice and actually won her case. And the government says that if she can win her case and sort of refer to caste in some way under ethnic grounds, then somebody else could easily take their case according to the under the existing law. But by saying that we're not going to implement the law, you know, just because of the consultation responses. You know, to me, it's like saying, well, we're not going to introduce legislation or race discrimination law because white or blue folk won't like it, or we're not going to have legislation on gender because men don't like it. I mean, that's exactly what the government has done. They haven't taken anything into account. You know, well, we know what government are thinking. We'll have a discussion around that. So we're pushing for the law because caste has migrated to the UK with the diaspora since the 50s. Second and third generation British born are still identifying with caste. And the recent BBC documentary, Hindus, Do We Have a Caste Problem, demonstrates this. There are charities listed on the Charity Commission's, the UK Charity Commission's website under caste affiliations. We've got places of worship that are based on caste affiliations. And in Sikhism, the 2018 British Sikh report found that nearly 50% of the respondent Sikhs believed in the caste system, and 13% consider it very important. So caste isn't, and caste discrimination isn't just restricted to one group of people. It touches and blemishes many other groups and religions and faiths. Earlier this year, also, you know, the Times carried an article on how algorithms in the Shadi.com website meant that people of a particular caste, no matter how perfectly they were matched, were not being introduced to their matches because they were deemed low caste. I mean, so that's caste applied in relationships. What we've been concerned about in our campaign has been more to do with the areas that are covered by the Equality Act, which is employment, provision of services, and education. But we know it happens in relationships. Now, the campaign about caste discrimination in Britain began in the 70s with politically savvy Ambedkarites like a Mr. Arun Kumar, who's now the General Secretary of the Federation of Ambedkarites and Buddhist Organizations, UK. And he raised the issue of so-called upper caste or taking to calling a pub the Chamar pub. That should be avoided because a majority of the clientele there were from the Chamar community. And for the last decade, last 2 decades, organizations like the ACDA, Caste Watch, DSN UK, FABO UK, Voice of Dalit International UK have robustly campaigned to outlaw caste discrimination, because we feel that that is the only way that you can have not only the legal protection that's required, that's afforded to other areas, you know, like gender and race and disability and sexual orientation and so on, but also because it will help change behaviors like the Race Relations Act and the other pieces of legislation, you know, have done over the decades since they've been around. Now, why would we say that, how sizable is this problem? Well, at the moment, there are just around 4.5 million people from the South Asian diaspora. And that's the 2011 census. So that's good, you know, that's 10 years back. So I'm sure the figures would increase. And when we talk about the South Asian diaspora, we talk about people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. And caste discrimination impacts on these citizens in various degrees. And added to the early migration of the people we have coming in the 80s and 90s and this, you know, are very highly skilled, mostly Indians, bringing their caste and their prejudices with them. So caste matters. And just for information, the NHS published some information about the nationalities of the people that's employed by them. And Indians came up second, you know, most, the numbers in the list. So first you had the others and then you had Indians. So you know, they're a sizable community. So let's be clear that caste discrimination is not extreme in Britain as it is in India. Dalit men don't get beaten up because they've decided to wear their moustache in a particular way, or you know, ride a horse to their wedding. You know, we don't have Dalit girls and women sexually taunted or raped as a form of societal casteist control and punishment. And the horrific gang rape and murder of Manish Valmiki in September this year, and the inertia of the police involved in this case, is just one recent example. But we do have people who identify with caste and caste discrimination in Britain, and there's evidence that I'm going to sort of touch on as well. Now, there is, you know, the evidence is available in numerous reports, you know, since you know, 2003 onwards. And these are the evidence is in not only in government commission reports, but independent reports. The most notable ones that have been commissioned by the government have been by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. They published a report, Caste in Britain, in 2010. And the Equalities and Human Rights Commission also published a study led by Dr. Meena Danda, and then and that was also published, you know, soon after. But before that, the Dalit Solidarity Network UK published a study of caste discrimination, and had a number of case studies contained within it to demonstrate or to show people and articulate to people how caste played out in practice, because sometimes it's quite difficult to kind of really understand it, the nuances of it. And then the Federation of Ambedkarites and Business Organizations UK also produced some reports. And then the Anti-Caste Discrimination Alliance did some research at what we believe to be a very critical time during the passage of the Single Equality Bill in 2009, that resulted in the clause on caste in the Equality Act 2010. Now, the Hindu Council and the Hindu Forum in their 2008 reports denied that there was such a thing as caste discrimination. They said that it was basically, if there was any discrimination, it would be in relationships, like who people chose to marry and so on. But actually, it wasn't going to occur, wasn't occurring in the workplace or in provision of services or in schools even. You know, they were point blank. So the Hindu Council in 2008 and the Hindu Forum in 2008 both said that. And they argued that the law wasn't necessary because of those reasons. And more recently, the Alliance of Hindu Organizations, that basically comprises of organizations like the Hindu Council, the Hindu Forum, and the Council of Temples, and so on, Hindu temples, formed together to try and counter the arguments for the against the pro-legislation groups. You know, during the sort of 2013, when the whole caste law issue was being looked at again by Parliament. And they've also set up an anti-caste legislation committee that has produced briefings against the law. And they've been advised by people like Dr. Prakash Shah and others, who argued that actually caste was imported to India by the British, and that, you know, there was no such thing before the British came. But you had people, you know, you had gurus like Guru Nanak, you know, hundreds of years before the British arrived, you know, who was talking about caste and the need to do away with caste discrimination, as was gurus like Guru Ravidas. Now, during the passage of the Equality Bill that I've referred to in 2009, parliamentarians and government argued that examples of caste discrimination that they'd been shared, that they'd had shared with them, or that they'd read about, you know, were really regarded as anecdotal. You know, they couldn't kind of use that as like firm evidence, and that any amendments to the caste, you know, on caste during the passage of the Equality Bill would probably not succeed because of that. And we had, ACDA had a number of meetings, and they were with actually at the time, because, you know, we had a Labour government at the time, and we had meetings with the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, who were very supportive of our need for the law. And as a result of those meetings, particularly with the person who was in charge of equalities for the Liberal Democrats, the Shadow Equalities Minister called Lynn Featherstone, said to us, look, you know, we really need sort of like proper research. And so ACDA just decided that we would do this research. We've never done research before, but we thought, well, we've got some time from July till October when Parliament returns. And let's get a survey out there, an electronic survey, an online survey, and some workshops and some focus groups around the country. And let's see what people tell us about it. Because as far as we're concerned, you know, we wanted to get the voice of our community out in the same way that the Hindu Forum and the Hindu Council had done, you know, the year before. And you know, we're really, really pleased that we managed to get 4 professors from 3 universities on board, and they advised us, you know, about research methods and you know, what would be useful for us. And as a result of that work, you know, the sort of extensive work, and then writing the report and analysing the responses and so on, transcribing the interviews, we drafted and published our research findings. And the report is called A Hidden Apartheid, Voice of the Community at the House of Lords in November. And you know, some of the headline figures, say from the online survey, of about 100 people who replied within 4 weeks, because we only had it for a limited time, 10% stated that they'd missed promotion at work due to their caste. 10% stated that they had been underpaid because of their caste. 9% said that they'd experienced verbal abuse because of their caste. And 7% of under 12-year-olds admitted to having been subjected to threatening behavior because of their caste, and 16% to verbal abuse. And just around the time that we published our report, and well, I would say just some months before that, Dr. Annapurna Wagare, who's a great champion and has been around, you know, since our Caste Watch days, had written a piece called The Modern Law Review. It was an article on caste discrimination and 21st century challenge for the UK discrimination law. Basically, our report and that article gave caste the sort of the kudos that have been required, you know, for the Equality Bill. And I'm not saying that we were the only people that did anything. Caste Watch, the Dalit Solidarity Network, the Voice of Dalit International, Federation of Ambedkarites, and so on. Everybody was at it, you know, lobbying their local MPs and lobbying any ministers possible, and joining us in the campaigns, you know, and protests outside Parliament, you know, to get this. But what I would say is that although we've got a duty for the legislation to be made, you know, on government, and the government has said that they're not going to legislate, or they're going to repeal the law even. I mean, that's because the Hindus have said they don't like the word, you know, the way that the Equality Act describes, you know, caste within the explanatory notes that I've just talked about. But you've had some Sikhs who've objected, saying that there's no caste discrimination within Sikhism. But if you look at the British Sikh report, they talk about how caste is relevant to them. You know, we've had, since 2010, you know, we've actually had 4 elections, general elections, and the caste discrimination law has become a general election issue, where we've had Hindu groups have advised their communities to vote Conservative because they said it was the only party that would repeal the law. And they've pretty much got what they wanted. But over the years, you know, the ACDA has also lobbied the UN meetings of the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in Geneva for the law, alongside organisations like the IDSN and DSN UK. And then later on, we've lobbied for the implementation of the law and tried to get the UN to apply pressure, on the UK government. And in 2013, about 6 months after Parliament agreed that the law, that the government should implement the 2010 law on caste, we invited Miss Nave Pillay, the then Commissioner for Human Rights, to attend a meeting at the House of Lords. And she came. We were absolutely thrilled. And she made some very, very strong noises and recommendations. And there's a Guardian article about what she said, or you can read what she said actually on the UN website. And I'm nearly finished. So the government, so basically where we are is that the government has stated over and over again in the past few years is that no one should suffer prejudice or discrimination on any grounds, including any perception of their caste. And they promised some guidance around this and the Equality Act. But where we are is that any future caste-related case law would need to demonstrate discrimination has been because of a claimant's descent, and thus their ethnic origins. And that's really a can of worms. We can discuss, why we see this as a can of worms. But relying on case law it only prolongs the pain at a really, really high, if not prohibitive, financial cost for people. So unless they get people, to fight their cases, it really costs a lot. And one of the first cases, the Vijay Begraj case from 2011, cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, for him to get there, only to find that the judge recused herself, and that case kind of fell by the wayside. Now ACDA is continuing to work by lobbying for the law, implementation of the law, and supporting sufferers of caste discrimination. And we've worked with about 3 in the last few years, and some of those leading up to employment tribunals, and 2 of those have successfully secured settlements before it's actually reached a tribunal. And we've also challenged bad practice. Earlier this year, we challenged an NHS hospital trust in the UK to remove some guidance, really offensive guidance, on their website about treating a Hindu patient. And it included words like harijan, that you don't use anymore, lumped together with menstruating women and mourners and Dalits being ritually unclean and therefore untouchable. That's the kind of language that was used in this leaflet. And as soon as we raised it with the NHS Trust, they were really understanding and removed it straight away. So actually, this sort of language is creeping in, unless we challenge it. And I'm sure other organizations are doing, I'm sure Meena will tell you other organizations are doing similar things. And I'd like to end my talk here. I know it's really rushed and I hope it's not disjointed, but it's just a few things about what because Habiba asked me, what is it that other people who are not part of the campaign can do, to help our campaign to get caste discrimination outlawed. And what I would say is, raise your voice, like if you see caste discrimination, just like other forms of discrimination, one thing that we've experienced, when we've supported victims and sufferers, is that people close ranks or they stay silent, with the perpetrators, and really that doesn't help. And if you can lobby, at any time and raise the issue of caste discrimination, but also include it in your organization's equality policies, as well. A couple of the cases that we worked on where we settled out of court, those organizations we can't talk about, have included caste discrimination as being unacceptable within their equality policies. And of course, join our organizations, like ACDA, DSN, and CasteWatch, and so on. But ultimately, like Black Lives Matter campaign, like that campaign, we really do need, the Dalit leaders, at the forefront, of the campaign, and there are so many of them, and we're getting there. So thank you for listening. And if you want to find out more about the ACDA, we have a website, which is www.acdauk.org.uk, or write to us at infoacda@googlemail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Santosh. That was extremely informative. I would now like to turn it over to Jyotsna to please share what she has to say.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you, the Rights Collective and Santosh, for this really informative and in-depth talk. I think there was a lot for me to learn there as well. Before I begin my talk, I would request Nishma if she can play a short clip, which this is a recent work that I did, which was commissioned by DHRDNet for their campaign, which they have launched, where they're highlighting one case of caste-based violence every day for 30 days. And this work was to kind of substantiate and support that campaign.
Okay, I'm sharing it now. I hope it works, the sound and also the video. Maybe someone just wave at me if it sounds like there's a problem on your side. Okay, thanks.
FIR कायम हो चुकी थी 307 में, बाद में इसमें 376 डी धाराओं की बढ़ोतरी की गई है। अब 307 से इसे 302 में तरमीम किए जाने की कार्रवाई प्रचलित है और वो की जा रही है। FIR कायम होने के बाद उसकी प्रथम किस्त 4,12,500 रुपये, जो 376 डी सेक्शन लगे हुए थे, उस सेक्शन के आधार पर शासन द्वारा पीड़िता के धनराशि परिवार वालों के खाते में उसे ट्रांसफर कर दिया गया है।
वहाँ पे 4-5 लड़के थे, ये वहाँ पे इनकी पहले से प्लानिंग थी, वहाँ पे घूम रहे थे ये। वहाँ से वो लोग आए बाजरे के अंदर से, और बहन के पीछे से उन लोगों ने दुपट्टा था मेरी बहन के ऐसे डला हुआ था, उससे एकदम गला घोट दिया। मम्मी को पता नहीं चला, मम्मी आगे लगी थी। बहन ने प्रयास भी करा होगा आवाज़ देने का, पर ताकत से उन लोगों ने दबा दिया और बाजरे के अंदर खींच ली गई वो। और बहन के साथ में थोड़ी देर बाद पता चलता, मम्मी आवाज़ भी देती है कि मनीषा मनीषा। मम्मी फिर वापस आती हैं वहीं पे, देखा तो मम्मी ने चप्पल दिखाई दी और कानों को कुंडल, तो और बाजरा टूटा हुआ दिखा था, तो मम्मी उसी में घुसी चली गई। तो देखा तो बहन एकदम कपड़े उतरे हुए थे, मम्मी ने अपने पल्लू से उसको ढका। वहाँ पे बच्चे खेल लेते तो बच्चों से बोला कि बेटा भैया को जल्दी जाओ बुला के लेके आओ। एकदम मरी हुई हालत में वो छोड़ के चले गए।
Love is transformative. Love is paradox. Love is resilience. Love is political.
Love is transformative.
Love is transformative.
Love is a
Love is a
paradox.
paradox.
Love is resilience.
It's a paradox.
Love
is transformative. It's resilience.
Love is transformative.
Is a paradox.
Love is a paradox.
is political.
Love is resilience. Love is political.
Resilience. Love is political.
It's political.
This work, I mean, just to give a little bit of background, the sound note, the sound score in the video is of an FIR. So a police is narrating how an FIR is lodged for this particular case. I will just share a very short presentation that I have here, and hopefully this will give us a little direction. Is it visible? Okay, great.
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. So just to begin by just talking a little bit about race and caste. As we all know that caste is a foundation of Indian society. It impacts 1.2 billion people in India and many around the world who are Indians. There are parallels between race and caste. However, they are very, very different. Well, race, as we see, is probably visible, but when you look at caste, it's not visible. It's not something that one can see and know where what is the caste of that person. Unless we know the last name of the person, it's difficult to know by looking at somebody whether they are a Dalit or an upper caste, or which caste they come from. As Ambedkar has said, that caste travels, and we all see that wherever upper caste Hindus have traveled and gone, they've taken the caste with them, the caste system with them. And I'm just rushing through some of these concepts because I want to talk a bit more about the following things in the presentation. There is a very similar sort of operations work here when we talk about privilege, and we talk about white privilege, and we all understand what white privilege means, but we somehow fail to understand what caste privilege is, or we understand and we don't really pay attention to it or don't want to acknowledge it. The way white privilege operates, it's in a similar way we see that caste privilege operates in India and globally, where one doesn't have to speak about their caste because of the privilege that the upper caste people enjoy. They don't necessarily have to talk about their experiences of caste discrimination or their experiences of caste for that matter. And when we're looking at the pandemic right now, we're seeing that Dalits are at the front line. When you're looking at the COVID relief and you're looking at the disposal of the burying of the dead bodies are all done by Dalits. And so they're really at the front line, bearing the brunt of the pandemic, so on and so forth. And the South Asian diaspora and how caste kind of relates to it and operates is something I'll talk further in the presentation. What does it mean to being a Dalit in India? And you look at the category of Dalit itself, it's not so homogeneous. You have Dalit women, you have queer people, you have trans people who are part of Dalit community. And in some ways, I feel the anti-caste movement and anti-caste discourse is further pushing these people again to the margins, where we're not really recognizing the intersectionality within and how caste. There are people within the Dalit community who are more marginalized and more vulnerable as compared to, say, Dalit men. However, not to say that Dalit men do not suffer the brunt of the caste system, but how do you look at the intersectionality within that is pertinent. Then I want to talk about the intersectionality of violence. Again, when you look at the incidents of caste-based violence and lynchings that are happening in India, the nature of that violence is very, like caste loaded. It's not just an act of violence. It's an act which is done on the Dalit community because of the caste that they come from, and less power that they sort of enjoy in society. So again, you know, when you look at the intersectionality, there are people who come, we all come with multiple identities and the vulnerabilities associated with our identities. However, in case of Dalit community, like I said, that we're still not talking about these multiple identities within the communities. So we're kind of always looking Dalit community as this overarching community where only the men are there, and somehow the agenda of Dalit women will find its way, however, is not really at the forefront. To talk about the caste in the West a little bit, you know, the representation and the discourse in the West is so also dominated by the upper caste Hindus, because people who've migrated or immigrated to the West were largely upper caste people who had resources, who had money, who had networks, and somehow found it easy to find their way to the Western countries through jobs or through, you know, selling of their assets, so on and so forth. So we see that the discourse that we have today in the West, which also means lack of representation and conversations around caste, is because the Western discourse is dominated by upper caste Hindus. The whole narrative of Hinduism and Hindutva practices is kind of sold as the idea of India, you know, as if India is a country where only Hindus live. We all know that India is a secular country, still is. We don't know how it's going to be in coming elections and going forward right now, but India is a secular country, which means that there is Hinduism, but there are other religions as well. But when you look at the popular media and you look at the popular discourse in the West, it's all about yoga, meditation, Hinduism, and, you know, the Indian culture and values, which are so rooted in Hinduism, as if there is no other way of life in India, as if there are no other people with other beliefs and all of that. And I think that is important to kind of remember. Again, the invisibilization of caste and caste-based discrimination across religions in India and the West is something that we need to think about. We're not talking about the caste discrimination that is prevalent in many other religions. Of course, Hinduism is the religion that forms and holds the caste system. But in India, we see all religions have managed to grasp this caste system, and we see how there are low caste or Dalit people across religions, and how they are sort of being discriminated constantly. Then recently, as we all know, that there was a case of in Cisco where an Indian American engineer was harassed because of his caste. And this led to the conversations around caste discrimination in the US. And because of the Dalit activists who are working in the US and in other countries, there is an increase exposure and voice. There is a highlighting of discrimination that again is, so to say, the burden of Dalit activists. I feel that even the activists who come from upper caste communities are still not raising their voice against caste discrimination. You know, I think that the burden and the labor of constantly telling the society and telling the media is still on Dalit activists and Dalit intellectuals. So I think this is a serious problem because the percentage of Dalit activists and intellectuals is anyway so less in India and in the West. And this is something that I think that needs allies. We need more voices. We need more people to be interrogating their own caste. You know, this is something that I have to keep saying, that there are 1.3 billion people in India, and 1.3 billion people in India have a caste. It's not that only Dalits have a caste. So why is this constant fetishization of the caste discrimination of Dalit community? You know, why are upper caste people not learning about the discrimination that they and their family have done over years? You know, I mean, I think that history of violation, history of discrimination needs to be learned by upper caste people. They need to learn about about caste system in their own communities, in their own families, to be able to understand how the caste system works. So I think there is a need to shift the gaze, and we need to turn the gaze towards ourselves rather than towards the Dalit community. Santosh mentioned about Black Lives Matter. Very quickly want to talk about the whole Black Lives Matter issue, as far as it's so important, and it gained a lot of momentum in India as well. But it was shocking to see that a lot of people, a lot of celebrities, a lot of people who came in support of Black Lives Matters do not, and still do not, talk about the caste discrimination in their own country. Still do not talk about the caste discrimination in the West. So I feel that as important as it is to show solidarity to all kinds of discrimination in one's country and around the world, it is also important to again interrogate what's happening in one's own country and what's happening in our own realities, and beginning there, I think, is really important. I want to show this a little bit. There was a huge discussion happened where there's this brand called Hathi Chai, and then there is still this company called Dalit Goods. These two companies are run by white people and also upper caste NRI. And I feel that when you look at this accessory, which is called a Dalit ring, I wonder what it means. And you look at this particular screenshot of this brand, which says Dalit Goods and Company. I feel that, I mean, it is, of course, it is problematic, but when you look at how capitalism has sort of also, how caste is playing constantly with capitalism, and where upper caste Hindus and NRIs, and especially white people as well, who are only learning about India through upper caste people, do not understand these nuances, do not understand what caste system really is, and therefore just using some of these terminologies to sell their products, to fulfill their agendas. And I don't understand how in 2020 we still have these brands which are thriving and selling, and you can check them out on Instagram as well. So in response to that, my collaborator Vidisha and I had made a video. This was called An Invoice to the South Asian Diaspora. I can share the link for everybody to see if you're interested, and where we were responding to basically this accessory and not just accessory, but this sort of branding and representation in some ways, that what it really means to have this, and how South Asian diaspora is doing very little to learn about the caste system and the caste discrimination. A lot of people in the diaspora, have also, sorry for being very candid, have been away from India and South Asia for generations, and do not understand, India very much so what it is today. And I feel that some of their ideas about India and the culture is far more regressive. You know, some of the things that we're trying to question in India, and we're really trying to raise our voice against, we see that diaspora is constantly romanticizing, glorifying, and really taking, basking in that sort of values which we think are so problematic, you know. And so I really wonder what it means to reinforce and evoke an identity of a South Asian or an Indian when you absolutely have no relationship with the country for generations, right? And to constantly evoke that identity, what does that even mean? And I think these are some of the questions I'm constantly thinking, and even talking to some of my friends who are also part of the South Asian diaspora. Now you look at the pandemic and the violence and what's happening in India today. There is this saffronization of the textbooks that we're seeing has happened in the US as well, and has continued to happen in India in phases, and it continues to happen today as well. There's been a massive attack on the progressive education institutions like FTII and TIS and Jamia and JNU. And state is doing very little to kind of, you know, protect these dissent voices. And recently we also saw that the Union Cabinet granted reservation, 10% reservation to upper caste in the country. And you know, on the basis of the fact that they were economically backward, but they were not Dalits. They've come in the general category. So there is a severe attack on the constitution of the country, and it's really, really challenging at the moment, because constitution has guaranteed the freedom and rights to minorities and to Dalits in this country. And the attack on constitution really means that the spaces are shrinking. There is less and less protection for the Dalit community, for Dalit women. And in case of Hathras, the Manisha case that we're seeing today, that's not the first case, and it won't be the last case of caste-based violence. And it really breaks me, because I feel that being a Dalit woman and being an activist in India, it's really, really scary at this moment, because you feel that any voice that you're raising against state is seen as a challenge, is seen as a, you know, your life is at stake. You're constantly under fear and threat. And so I feel like state is doing very little to provide protection to the Dalit community. And the Hathras really, I mean, showed us that we have not made any progress. You know, we thought that perhaps that there has been some freedom, some sort of change in the situation for Dalit community. But when you look at Hathras, and you know, and after Hathras, there has been every day there has been a reportage of Dalit women being raped and murdered. So so again, like, this is not the first, this is not going to be the last. There is a impunity which is being sanctioned by the state, you know. And we saw that in case of Manisha, that her body was you know, was burnt at 3 a.m. Her family was put under arrest, house arrest. Like, police locked up the family of the deceased and did not let them see the dead body as well. And I feel that this kind of treatment can never be given to an upper caste family. you know. And so a lot of people kept saying that this is not about caste, this is not about caste. And I wonder then what is this really about? Because if it was an upper caste family and something of this sort would have happened, this is not the treatment we would have seen, because we are looking at our history and we're seeing the treatment that's given to Dalit women, to Dalit community, is far more gruesome as we see the treatment that's given to the upper caste people in this country. The body of the Dalit women, I want to talk a little bit about the aesthetics of it, and I think it's important because you know, you see that there is the caste system, it operates in a way where there is purity and pollution, and it's so stark that, you know, but when you look at rape, you look at cases of abuse and harassment, then those boundaries of purity and pollution are constantly transgressed, because Dalit women are seen as not desirable. Their bodies, their faces are not seen as beautiful, as something that, as somebody who needs respect, you know, and they're seen as constantly as these bodies that are just available to us to mete out any kind of treatment that we want, because we're seeing that the state doesn't provide protection, the police doesn't provide protection, and there is a whole nexus of state, police, and the media, which are predominantly upper caste, and hence they're all working together to just make sure that somehow these cases of caste-based violence are hushed and do not get any sort of limelight or attention that they need. I feel that state doesn't grieve enough for Dalit people, for Dalit community. State doesn't grieve enough for minorities, for marginalized people in this country. And we see that the way state respond by denying protection, by denying compensation, by denying justice, and there has been no apology, there has been no mention of any kind of this caste-based violence by any member who is in a powerful position of authority. So much has happened in the country in the last few months, and there has been absolutely no apology, there has been no remorse, and there has been no grieving by the state. And that only shows that the lives of some people do not matter. And it's just been, I feel as a Dalit woman, where I have been privileged that my family has been able to, move away from caste-based occupation a generation ago. But when I look at Dalit women and Dalit young girls who are dying and who are being killed, not dying, who are being murdered, I feel that they could have done something with their lives. They could have been somewhere. And I could have been that woman if I was living in UP, if I was in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, I could have been that woman. And the fact that I have a certain privilege of not being there and being somewhere else where I am slightly more protected, but I don't know for how long, because raising your voice against state, raising your voice against the injustice, every day I feel you're grieving. You're grieving not just for your loss, you're grieving for the loss of people who've been murdered, who were part of your community. And state and police has just stood there, watched, not just today, for months and for years and for decades. They have just watched and did nothing. And even today we see that this is not a intergenerational trauma that we talk about. We also want to talk about the intergenerational discrimination that the upper caste society, the police, the bureaucracy, and the state that has done. And there is an intergenerational violation and discrimination that continues to happen today. That today that we have people from Dalit community who've been able to get educated, who are raising their voice against this violence, not for themselves, but for the community. But it's because of them, I feel that there is some sort of noise. I still feel the upper caste community in India and globally is complicit, and they're not doing enough. They're not raising their voice enough, and they're not doing their job. I feel like and the note on which I want to leave is that people who have caste privilege, please talk to your people. Please talk to your family members, your lovers, your partners, your teachers, your employers. Please talk to your people and say that it's not okay. You know, this is about more than anything, this is about being alive, you know, sharing the experience of being alive and being human, and you need to talk to your own people, you know, because talking to Dalit people and talking to Dalit community is not going to help. We're not the people with power as much. We're not the people who can shift anything. So if there's anybody who can shift, is our upper caste people, especially the ones who have their relatives, parents, friends, family in occupations like police, you know, judiciary, court, teaching, wherever they are. I think they need to make some difference, and they need to be allies. It's no longer, I think, important to just say that we're not casteist and we're not favoring caste system. I think you have to be very vocal and very actively against caste discrimination and against the brutalities that are happening, and to be speaking of all these brutalities wherever you get an opportunity, to whoever, especially to your people, you know. And I think that's on that note I will end my chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jyotsna. There's so much to say. I can only thank you right now for sharing what you shared. And you know, when I hear what you have to say, although studying Ambedkar and studying, you know, the way things are going right now, one is filled with a certain hopelessness or a certain kind of sadness. But when I hear what you have to say, I feel motivated to keep talking, to keep learning, to keep unlearning. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing what you had to share. And I would like to now pass it on to Meena. Please take it away, Meena.
Well, that's going to be a hard act to follow, Jyotsna. Thank you so much for that incredibly, incredibly powerful presentation. And I think one of the reasons that I'm here today really is to talk about that last thing that you said. You know, we need to start calling out caste. We absolutely need to be standing in solidarity with people that are calling out caste. We cannot keep sweeping this under the table. And that's why I do what I do. And I will put my hand up, absolutely, that when I first started this, I had no idea how ingrained and how abusive that this system actually could be. And I feel that, you know, I mean, when I talk about solidarity, it's about standing in solidarity, not to a specific country, not to a race, not to a religion. I am paraphrasing a quote here, but rather to humanity. But where is the humanity in caste? There is no humanity in caste. I mean, it is a system that divides by a structure designating X at the top and Y at the bottom. And it is a complete dehumanization of a people. And I mean, actually, when we're looking at this, and, you know, let's think about numbers. I mean, Jyotsna's saying, you know, it's the so-called, the oppressive castes that need to start looking inwards. And that is absolutely right, because so many times I can sit around a table, around the Zoom call like this, and I'm preaching to the converted. I don't, you know, we can't be preaching to the converted. We have to start to preach to those that don't get what we're talking about? And how do we do that? I mean, we have to think about how we're raising awareness, but I think there are going to be a lot of people on this call that, you know, Jyotsna's incredibly powerful presentation, I hope, has really opened your eyes. I mean, Santosh has given such a detailed view of caste here in the UK. And let's be very honest, you know, caste travels. It goes wherever South Asians go. It goes where Indians go, you know, and caste privilege goes with it. Now we need to dismantle that. We need to start talking differently. We need to talk about why do we want to perpetuate this inequality and discrimination? You know, we're all talking about equality. We're all talking about non-discrimination, but it just simply doesn't exist when we're talking about now 260 million people. 260 million people, and that's a very conservative estimate, are deemed to be Dalits or self-identify as Dalits. Now that, if you take 260 million people, that is the 5th largest country in the world today. Yes, we could have a complete rebellion, but if it's only those people that are rebelling, then we still won't change the structures. And Santosh gave, you know, a really powerful presentation about caste in the UK, and absolutely why, you know, why we have been campaigning for this legislation for so long. But one of the main reasons that certainly I feel it's so important is because there is actually a rule of law here in the UK. Now, if we show that caste has travelled, and even this government that refuses to activate this legislation has accepted that caste discrimination exists here in the UK, what they don't want to do is upset a very powerful and very rich lobby that doesn't want their reputation tarnished. And I think, but for me, the rule of law does make a difference here in the UK. And as Santosh pointed out, she knew that, you know, that when she came to the UK, that if there was sort of racist behavior or sexist behavior, there were laws there to protect. Now, there are no laws to protect against caste discrimination here in the UK yet. But if that rule of law held sway, if that law was activated, then people would actually have to obey that law, because to break the law would actually have a punishment. It would actually have a consequence. That's what rule of law means. And that then sends a powerful message back to India, who has the laws to protect and enshrine their citizens. They just don't implement it. And the trouble with not implementing legislation means that behaviors don't change. And when you implement legislation, even if your casteist mindset stays with you, you know you have to change your casteist behavior, because there is a consequence, as I said. And slowly over time, as your behavior changes, one hopes that actually the mindsets can change. And it may take a generation, it may take 2, but it will start to change in the same way that we've seen differences because of the Sex Discrimination Act, the Race Discrimination Act. These are all now firmly embedded into our psyche. Those are not firmly embedded in the South Asian psyche. In India, those laws are not implemented. So without implementation, there is no laws. Rights need remedy. If there are no remedies, then those rights are meaningless. And I think that's what's really important, and why we have to stand up and be counted for this. Because Jyotsna mentioned also the case in the US. Now this is a pivotal moment for us in the UK, as well as Dalits across the globe, but also in the US, because caste privilege has really played a massive part in the US diaspora more than anything else. But there's a reason why Kamala Harris identifies herself as a Black woman. She doesn't identify herself until now, obviously, when she's on the election trail, as an Indian woman or an Indian American. She identifies herself as Black. And I think the reason why is because if she had gone with her Black husband to India, they wouldn't have been accepted. They wouldn't have had any part. They wouldn't have been part of that community, no matter how many dosas you make, no matter how many idlis you might eat. And you know, I think this is what is really important. You know, we need to start thinking about that, and that's why it's so important for solidarity. This is why it's so important for us to all stand. All these people that are on the call today, I don't know how many of you are so-called upper caste. I don't know how many of you are Dalits. I don't know how many of you don't identify. It doesn't matter. We need to actually all come together to just see this is wrong. This cannot keep happening in the 21st century. We need things to change. And we can work at the UN, we can work at the EU, we can have all these things which make small differences. But actually, it's the court of public opinion that starts to make a difference in the end. And we need to actually start breaking down the walls of untouchability. And I think also what has become increasingly evident under this pandemic, under this crisis, is that it has exacerbated untouchability. It has exacerbated discrimination. And I want to say that last week I did moderate an event at the UN, and the event was specifically about language. And one of the things that I raised at that event was the language that has now become normalized. I mean, and this is the global terminology of social distancing. Social distancing is what happens to a Dalit every single day. That is just another term for untouchability. And it has become normalized under this pandemic. We need to stop using social distancing. It is safe distancing. You can still be social. We're all being social now at a distance. You don't have to have social distancing, but you do need to have distancing which protects your health. And I think under the pandemic, again, Dalits have suffered from lack of access to healthcare, to sanitation. All of a sudden, sanitation workers are being called frontline defenders. What on earth does that mean? They're still shoveling shit, quite frankly. And they're shoveling shit under the worst possible circumstances. So we're calling frontline defenders so that they can go out and still shovel shit. I'm so sorry that, I am using some language that some people might find upsetting, but I think language is so very important. And I think we need to start the language discourse as much as we need to start the end caste discrimination discourse. Because language, we think, they say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. Well, in fact, they do. And they can hurt physically as well as they can emotionally. And I think that it's really important that, I'm just, I can see that the chat box is on fire here. So I want to leave as much time as possible for questions. But I just feel that, it's so important that the Dalit Lives Matter movement has got to be led by Dalits. But those of us that are non-Dalits or don't identify with caste or whatever, we need to stand by with people and actually start to crush a system, even if it has existed for 3,000 years. The time is nigh. We need to actually make people sit up and think. When George Floyd sparked off Black Lives Matter, why didn't Manisha spark off Dalit Lives Matter? Because she didn't matter. And can we really look ourselves in the face and say she didn't matter? A young woman whose body was completely broken, who was just dumped at the side of the road, where hospital bed was not made available, and it was all because of her caste. We cannot take caste out of this equation. It plays such a powerful and important part for so many people. So I think when you're in the diaspora, just think what you're thinking about caste in the diaspora, because it does happen. It really does. It might not be in your face the way it is in India or Nepal or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, but it's happening. And without organizations like ACDA and DSN UK and Caste Watch, it would still be under the table, because we're providing a reputational risk to too many people. So we need to keep fighting, and we need your help to do that. So I'm asking you all, as Jyotsna did, to join us to break the barrier of caste and to just dismantle this structure that has been going on for way, way too long. It's a global movement now. Let's all get together and make it a powerful, powerful global movement. But I think, Varun, I'll stop, just because, as I said, everyone is going mad on chat box, and I want that on fire to come out and for you to be able to have a few questions. I will put a few links in there to DSN UK website. The other thing as well, we need to just provide more evidence, I think, as well here in the UK. That's a really important thing for us to do and show. And I think, we need to be prepared, because there are powers behind the scenes that are trying to repeal this legislation and sneak it through the back door. So we need to make sure that we're armed to make sure that that doesn't happen. So Varun, Nishma, Habiba, especially Jyotsna and Santosh, thank you so much. I'll take any questions from whoever is going to ask them.
Thank you so much, Meena. That was incredibly powerful. And I feel so honored to be able to listen to all of you speak, and to be able to at least I would like to ask one question from myself. For lack of time, I have one question, and then I will just have I have a bunch of questions here that that people have been asking, and some of them are really interesting. And this question is really for all of you. So anyone who would like to take it, please, any of the three of you, please take it up. We've heard today throughout your talks about two tiers, I want to say, of what we are trying to work against. One is the dismantling of caste-based discrimination, and then one is the dismantling of caste itself. And I would like to hear from all of you sort of where you think the conversation is going, where it should go, and what exactly what constitutes the difference between these two things that we are working towards, and how we should proceed on that path. So any of you, please, I would love to hear from you all.
So shall I just kick off with this very quickly?
Please go ahead.
So, I mean, I think there are two things. I mean, I know here in the UK, we talk about discrimination in particular because we're trying to get the legislation, but we have to quite honestly pigeonhole it into the terms under the Equality Act, which is around provision of goods and services, employment, education, etc. But I don't know, there'll be lots of personal views. For me, you can't you can't eliminate caste discrimination unless you dismantle the caste structure. That for me is evident. So that is what I feel is the difference between the two. It's also very difficult because, again, with the UK, the lobby that has the voice, the ear of government, obviously don't want to dismantle the system, and they basically are accusing us of interfering in their own social prejudices, but their own social thing. They want to be able to have their own little social clubs, etc., and they say we're interfering in that. Personally, if that's what they wanted to do, I don't want to interfere in their little weirdo clubs. But if I really do think that caste, the structure itself has to be dismantled to get rid of the discrimination.
Thank you. Yeah, Jyotsna, Santosh.
Shall I come in, Varun?
Please.
I totally agree with with Meena. We have been focusing purely on the caste discrimination aspects and being quite respectful of people's diversity and so on. But actually, when you look at the linkages of caste discrimination to what the basis of it is, like you've done, Varun, in your studies, if the basis of it is enshrined in the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas, then those communities, need to look at what it is, how can they justify it in this kind of environment? Because you're looking at texts that are thousands of years old, and people are still, having the superiority and the sort of the divisions and the kind of, the sort of the concepts of who's polluted and who's not. defined within, you know, aspects of that. So although we want to deal with caste discrimination sort of by law, which we should do, we live in a country, you know, that has very, very robust equality laws that are implemented, that are enforced, unlike India. So, you know, you may have untouchability banned in India, but, you know, it still occurs. And you may have, you don't really have any laws per se in India to do with caste discrimination, you know, of people within the workplace or provision of services and so on, like we do, you know, that we aim to have over here. But as Baba Saheb Ambedkar said, you know, the annihilation of caste is our ultimate goal. You know, you have to break down caste in order to be able to move forward. And now is a perfect opportunity, you know, where we are having these debates. And the Dalit voice is much, much stronger now than it was 20 years ago when I started. You know, I didn't really want to talk about my caste. You know, I'm a Dalit. I wanted to kind of like just get on with my civil service career. And you always felt, you know, like people, you know, you read Jessica Dutt's book or others, where people say, well, actually, you know, I didn't want my caste to interfere with my progress. You know, I didn't really have many sort of, you know, people from South Asian diaspora within the headquarters where I worked in the civil service. But, you know, until we get rid of annihilate caste, you know, we're just not going to, you know, move forward with this.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Jyotsna?
No, I think Meena and Santosh responded, so I will I will probably take some other question.
Okay, sure. Well, so as both of them talked about the law and about changing things in the law and how we have to kind of enshrine the changes that we want to make within certain aspects of the law in order for it to come about. There's one question here on the role of law, and this is from Ravideep, and it says, I get the need for legislative regulation. However, history has shown us that this must go hand in hand with cultural awareness and unlearning. We are surely also talking about a huge intergenerational cultural shift. And so I was just, I thought this might be something interesting to kind of continue on about the conversation regarding changing the law as well.
Maybe I could take that, or if Meena wants to take it, I'm quite happy.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things that government argued in 2013, when we were pressing for implementation of the law, and the opposition were advocating, you know, the people who are opposed to the law, namely the Hindu Forum, the Hindu Council, and so on. They were saying, let's do talk for a change. You know, they spent, you know, government spent something like £70,000 or something on this talk for change project that never got off the ground, because the community was saying, let's handle it by ourselves. Let's talk about, you know, how we can sort of make things better, you know, so that people don't feel discriminated against. And you don't really need the law, you can talk about it. But actually, you know, we've had thousands of years of people trying to deal with this issue. You can't just rely on people talking about it or society, you know, making small changes. When you have a piece of law, basically, you know, I think, you know, like Meena talked about, you know, you have various sanctions, but there are also these, you know, that people can be sort of nervous of, like within the work environment, because you think twice about discriminating against somebody, you know, like in the workplace or in the provision of services. If you know that there's a law that, you know, that you can be taken to an employment tribunal or taken to a court, you know, and be dealt with, and your company might end up paying hundreds of thousands of pounds. You know, we've dealt with, you know, we've just been working with an NHS in Scotland, and on a case that's settled out of court. And one of the things that that they said is that, look, you know, if the law had been there, we might have protected this person a little better, you know, as an organization, and we wouldn't have had to fork out hundreds of thousands of pounds, you know, for this. And this is why we need this awareness of what's happening. And I think, you know, so laws have that, the legal remedy, but also the potential to change behaviors. And we can't say that all equality laws, I mean, look at that, you know, the race laws here in the UK and, you know, even in America, you know, some of the stuff that's happening there is still always room for improvement. But you've got to start somewhere, and I believe that the law is where you start.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, that makes perfect sense. Anyone else, Jyotsna, Meena, do you want to add anything about that question? I think, okay. All right, here, now the next question, I think this one, it'll be interesting to hear your perspectives on, because you have, at some point or another, the Black Lives Matter movement got mentioned a few times. And we have one question from Nishma, that where is it useful or not useful to compare race with caste? Is it actually helpful to draw these comparisons? And I know, I mean, as a professor myself in the academic space, this is like really an exploding sort of conversation that's happening. I've been part of so many different reading groups and panel discussions about race and caste. And I think it would be really wonderful to hear from you about your thoughts on the matter. Maybe Jyotsna, if you have some thoughts on this.
So I think, this question keeps coming back. I think it's as important. I think if race helps you understand the system of violence and system of subjugation, and if you think that category of race is helping you understand that, then that's great. But I think that's probably the beginning of it. But of course, like I said in the beginning, that race and caste are very different, and I think we need to understand caste separately and independently of race. I think we keep comparing caste to race, and then it just becomes like some synonymous thing, or you replace caste to race and race to caste as if they're both the same things, and to say that being racist and being casteist are two different things. However, I'm pretty sure somebody who's racist is also casteist, and somebody who's casteist is also racist. So these are two systems of oppression. These are two different systems in which people and communities have been deprived of human rights for decades. However, I would say that it is important that one understands that caste is not as visible as races, and of course, one cannot change one's race and one cannot change one's caste. That's given to you. I mean, as an Indian, we all have a gender, we all have a caste. And I think that's where you begin understanding that this is not something that either you can ask for, or you can change, or you can get rid of. Hence, you carry with you when you're born till you're dead. So, and this system really governs and shapes what opportunities you can have access to or not, who you can marry or not, what kind of education, exposure, or even life expectancy you can have, depending upon which caste you're born. So this is as real as it gets. It's not just about talking about caste or discrimination or a system in silos or in air. It really impacts how much you can live and what all you can have access to or not. So I think there are similarities there with race. However, again, like I said, it is important to understand caste independent of race, because it is a very different system.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything to add about that?
I was just going to add, for me, I mean, I totally agree with what Jyotsna said, but I think what we are at a moment in time where the race and caste movements should join. There is something that we need to do now, because as Jyotsna said in her presentation, you know, how many of those, can I just say, very fair, very beautiful Bollywood actors came out with a Black Lives Matter statement, yesterday or the day before, a cricketer went down and did the black one knee stand in the IPL. No, not a single one of them has ever said anything on Dalit Lives Matter. Not a single one of them has gone down on a knee for a Dalit. You know, so I think there are lessons that we need to learn at this point from the Black Lives Matter movement that will start to make a difference for us with Dalit Lives Matter. And I think, you know, in that sense, you know, there is kind of that analogy of learning as much as anything else.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I think I will leave it to about 2 more questions. The next question is really kind of a combination of a few questions that came up about the kind of intergenerational nature of caste discrimination and also the dismantling of caste discrimination. And so first of all, you know, we have part of that question is, how far do you think especially in the diaspora, the younger generations of people who had immigrated over to somewhere in the diaspora have come in terms of their notion of caste and in terms of their caste identity and thinking about caste and also moving away from caste discrimination? How far do you think we have come? And also just how much of a transgenerational, intergenerational process do you think that the dismantling of the caste discrimination and caste system in the diaspora will be?
May I just respond to that
please.
quickly? And I'm sure Santosh and Meena have lots to say on that. So when I was studying in SOAS, you know, I'll just talk from my experience. I never talked or heard anybody talk about caste. In our classroom, yes, we had 1 or 2 readings given to us to learn about caste, you know, but it's always something just to kind of learn, because you never expect a Dalit student to be sitting in that class. You know, how many of Dalit students would actually make it to SOAS? I wouldn't have either if I didn't get the scholarship. But in that 1 year of period, I did not hear anybody or any of my classmates, or even I didn't even overhear anybody talk about caste. And we know that SOAS has a lot of South Asian students. So I mean, and caste is also taught. It's not that SOAS doesn't have any reading or any conversation around caste at all, of course. But in that 1 year of period, I did not hear anybody. There were no conversations. Nobody openly talked about it. There was absolutely no awareness of caste. I mean, you're studying about India and Indian society in South Asia, but not really talking about caste. So I feel that's how far we've come. And I'm talking about 2014, 2015. And this is as recent as now. So I feel that you look at, I mean, also looking at the societies that are there, the million societies that are there in SOAS, there is not even one society that would talk about Ambedkar or talk about caste. You know, there is none. And I don't know, I know about SOAS, I don't know about LSE, I don't know about any other education institution. So if we're not having these conversations at home, and if we're not having these conversations in the education institution, then where are we having these conversations? And who is telling us about these this really violent system? Our parents are not, we've never spoken to our parents in our families. I mean, that's an assumption, and I know it's a very fair assumption because of the lack of conversation that I see that was there in SOAS. I don't think people are talking about caste and caste discrimination in their own families, right? And then there is none at the education level. So I don't know where is that platform where people are engaging if they say they are.
Brilliant, thank you. I think, you know, well, does anyone else want to respond to that, or perhaps the latter half of that question, Meena or Santosh?
Can I just add just something? I think
please.
Things have moved on, certainly in SOAS. You know, there've been sort of these annual Ambedkar lectures and so on. So there are universities that are talking a lot more, and you've got people like, you know, Dr. David Moss and Murli and others, you know, who are regularly holding events and talking about this, not only about caste atrocities in India, but also what's happening with regards to the law here. But actually, you know, when someone who's lived here in this country for over 50 years, you know, you become aware of caste. You know, now you've got cable TV, you know, with star channels, you know, with all these dramas that all these people, you know, sit there from the Asian community, sit there and watch. You know, the elders, others, youngsters, you know, will sit there and watch, and, you know, they can see, you know, the structures and, you know, what goes on. You've got, when it comes to marriage, you know, people talk about castes. You know, I've got a friend that I've known forever, and when she's marrying, this is a girl I grew up with here, a Sikh girl, and when it came to the marriage of her son and her daughter, she wants to marry that person into a Jat Sikh family. She would not consider marrying them to a Dalit. And now that she hasn't been able to find anyone, she's saying, oh, you know, I'm quite happy as long as the person's educated and so on. So when it comes to marriage, you know, there's an element of that. And when it comes to schools, you know, we worked at ACDA, Caste Watch, and DSN would be aware, worked at kind of like looking at the sort of, you know, when they teach Hinduism, say, for example, within, you know, in schools, and I went through this during, you know, my primary school and secondary school, you know, they talk about caste as well as part of that, but in a really horrible, you know, way, not in a way that it should be about oppression and suppression for thousands of years. It's more about, well, that person does the dirtiest jobs. You know, there's a book by Penny, I'm trying to remember what her surname is, but which is available, you know, for foundation studies, you know, taught to 11, 12-year-olds, you know. So in schools, it happens. So we've got, you know, there are these discussions, and now we have TV channels like Kanchi TV, and, you know, we have some Indian newspapers and so on, you know, where those people will talk about the caste atrocities. So, you know, you get it, you know, on a 24-hour news channel. But not a news channel, but, you know, you get it. And I'm seeing a lot more broadsheets talking about the Hathra rape case, or, you know, what's happening with the migrant workers during the pandemic, and how caste has affected, you know, their voices and the treatment of them. So it's maybe it's because I'm an activist and I'm a Dalit, and I'm kind of, you know, talking about it. But if I'm talking, you know, if I'm talking about some of my friends who are Hindu and Sikh, they talk about it, you know, as well. They might not do anything very much about it, but they do.
Thank you very much. I want to conclude with a question that is about resources. I think, you know, now that we've had this brilliant discussion, we should kind of end it on a note that allows people to continue to study afterwards and continue the conversation. So there's a question from Florian that says, is there a and this is maybe all of you can in turn perhaps share the resources that you are working with and stuff that you would like people to know about. The question is there a dedicated collection or archive of materials on caste discrimination in the UK yet? Speaking from a humanities position, I'm asking explicitly with an eye to the role that literature and art generally could play in raising awareness. But beyond that, I would also like to add to that question that, you know, any resources that you believe are important and foundational for people to either begin or to continue their journey of learning and unlearning caste privilege, about caste violence and caste oppression, would be greatly appreciated. So at this point, you know, please feel free to share the resources that you know of and that you think would be important.
Can I just say that the one thing that everyone should read, if you can get your hands on it, is the one that Santosh mentioned earlier, and that's The Annihilation of Caste by Dr. Ambedkar. that is the seminal start. Get in their book. And I mean, there are so many new books out, and I'll put up websites and stuff on the Twitter feed. And I know that Santosh has already mentioned ACDA, but you know that will really, there's so many things in the Indian context. But I mean, now with the diaspora, we've got, you know, Ants Among Elephants. We've got Yashika Dutt's new autobiography. You've got Isabel Wilkerson's one talking about race and caste, when we talked about that earlier. And also, I think, just to respond to Rima, because she's been really active on the chat box about kind of being mindful of individuals facing an uphill battle and potentially attack. I mean, Santosh and I get it on a day-to-day, very, very minor basis. You know, it's manageable, and it's usually, to be honest, you tend to be Hindu lobby attacks. Mostly accusing me, especially, of being a kind of evangelical Christian that just wants to convert all Hindus into Christianity. They've never actually worried about what faith I am or ever asked. But just to say, it's people like Jyotsna that we need to worry about. You know, is the people you saw on one of her slides. You know, the number of Dalit activists in India that have now been jailed on trumped up charges. I mean, and the last one, you know, Father Stan, you know, he's 83, and this, you know, and it's just without any basis to these charges whatsoever. And there is now an atmosphere of fear and constant threat for Dalit activists in India, and that is something that we should be aware of, and we do try and address these issues. But you know, I think here in the UK, yes, there are the personal attacks, but you know, they kind of come with the territory.
Thank you. Santosh or Jyotsna, please, one of you go ahead.
I've talked a lot. I'm quite happy for Jyotsna to speak.
Okay,
no,
Jyotsna.
I don't have much to say, except I mean, I can keep speaking and we'll never run out of this, but I agree with Meena and Santosh and what Meena said, that there is a real threat because all the dissent voices are being arrested. We're seeing two young girls, Devangana and Natasha from Pinjarator, who are still in the police, and they are also very close allies, friends. And very similar, we're seeing lots like people who are older, people who are younger, who are raising their voice, are being targeted at the moment, are being interrogated. So the threat is really real, but I think that's why it's important to have some sort of solidarity beyond India, to then know that one is not just a single person. I mean, of course, there are groups here as well and all of that, but I think I think one point that I forgot to say was that that there has been a lot of lobbying and support by upper caste Hindus who have contributed money and networks and support in the Indian elections that happened earlier, and there is going to be, I reckon going forward, there's going to be even more money and support to be pushed to India to make sure the conservative government stay in power. So I think that's why it's important to have that solidarity beyond India, because there are upper caste Hindu forces which are active and which are supporting the election, which are supporting the present government in India right now. So I think that is something that we really need to be more vocal about as well. I mean, from being in the UK, because I think we're already doing what we're doing in India, but I think if there is a pressure that is being built up outside India, that also really helps.
Cool, thank you very much. Okay, on that note, I would really love to thank first and foremost our beautiful speakers. You have, I mean, what you have shared with us is so important and something that we all need to go back and reflect on, and we all need to go back and share as much as we possibly can. As you all have said, really the time is now to do this. So thank you so much. At this point, I would like to hand it back over to Nishma so that she can kind of wrap up our session. But again, thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to the TRC team for organizing this.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the speakers. It was just such an amazing session, and you all brought so many different perspectives, and thank you so much for taking that time and sharing with us. We really appreciate it. So just to close off, to say that it's being recorded, so this will come up on our Facebook Facebook page later for anyone that wants to follow up. We have also mentioned, as Varun sort of said earlier, that we do have a Brown Women Unlearn reading group as part of the Rights Collective, and we are currently looking at the topic of caste oppression, caste discrimination. And so we've been going through a number of readings. We started with Annihilation of Caste, and we've been building upon that. And we are now, it was initially just for the team, but we are opening it up to anyone that wants to join. So I think we should be putting the link to how to join that in the chat. We'll put it in the description of the recording as well. So please feel free to sign up. That will be open until the end of the week, and then we'll close that because we'll have a limited number of spaces. So please do sign up to continue this conversation, to continue learning and challenging ourselves. We also have a resource hub where we will add all of the resources that were mentioned today and some other ones that we have as well. And we will share that with you all in the follow-up email. And if you want to keep in touch with us, our social media is there. And you can also sign up to our newsletter. So please feel free to do that. And if I'm not mistaken, we should be sharing the feedback form in the chat. And we would really, really love to get your feedback, because we've been doing these teach-ins now for a little while. And we just want to make sure that we're sort of tailoring it to what works for other people. We're challenging you. We're sharing information that you're looking for. So please take sort of 2 minutes, I think, to fill that out. We'd really appreciate it. But that's it. Thank you so much. Feel free to drop off, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.